Thank you so much for having me. Today, I would like to talk about three things. I would like to talk about the connection between mattering, happiness, and well-being. But before we get going with my presentation, I would like to ask you a simple question. And that is, what does mattering mean to you? So take 30 seconds to think about what does the word mattering mean to you. And then I'm going to ask for some help, and some of you are going to tell me what you think mattering is. Okay, so take a little time to think about this word. Okay, let's ask for some volunteers. This is the part where there is audience participation. You get to help me. So, what is mattering? Whatever you focus on. Okay, thank you. Please. Okay, to make a contribution, to help. Okay, what else? Yes, please. Making a difference in the world. Thank you. What else is mattering? Yes. Caring about something. Yes. What else is mattering? Sorry, say that again? Channeling energy. Yes, yes, please. To be human. Okay, great, lovely. Yes, please. Having meaning. Yes. Okay, these are all. Oh, yes, one more, please. Contributing. Thank you. So, I think that I can already go home. You know what mattering is. Thank you very much. Have a nap. No, you really understand what mattering is. And as we will see in a moment, mattering consists of two key components. One is feeling valued in the world, either by yourself or others. That's number one. And the second one is adding value, making a contribution to yourself, other people, your work, and the community. So mattering is about feeling valued and adding value. Okay? So we will return to this. But I think you already understand intuitively what mattering is about. Now, not everybody matters the same in the eyes of some people. And this is a problem that we have. So let's see if we can begin exploring some barriers to mattering. And for that, we're going to play a very little game, which is some sort of Jeopardy. Okay? So I'm going to put up a name, and you need to tell me who is that person. Okay? So who are these people? Do you know who is Ramon Esteves? Martin Sheen. Do you know who is Krishna Banji? Ben Kingsley from the Gandhi movie. Have you seen Gandhi? Now, do you know who Isur Danielovich Dembski is? This is Kirk Douglas. And finally, just one more. Do you know who Joseph Levitch is? Jerry Lewis. And why do you think Ramon Esteves wanted to change his name as a movie actor to Martin Sheen? Because Martin Sheen was afraid that a Hispanic name would be an impediment to his career. And Krishna Banji did the same thing, because they were afraid that being recognized from an ethnic minority would be an impediment to their careers. And the same happened to Kirk Douglas, and the same happened to Jerry Lewis, and to many other people who, for some reason or another, they have to cover their identity. And this is one of the great disservices that we can do to any one individual, which is to force them to become something they are not. So covering is a very serious phenomenon, in the LGBT community, in migrant communities, in any community where your identity is threatened by the majority of people, right? So you have told me that mattering is about making a contribution. I have told you it's also about feeling valued. So I want you now to read with me a very short paragraph from Jane Eyre. And if you remember Jane Eyre, the famous book by Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre had many trials and tribulations in her life. If you remember, there was also a movie recently. Jane Eyre was penniless, heartbroken. She had a lot of problems, and she didn't feel that she mattered in the world anymore. That was until she came to a small town where she became a teacher. And I want you to read with me how Jane Eyre experienced moving to a new life. I felt I became a favorite in the neighborhood. Whenever I went out, I heard on all sides cordial salutations and was welcomed with friendly smiles. To live amidst general regard, though it be by the regard of working people, is like sitting in sunshine, calm and sweet, serene inward feelings bud and bloom under the rain. At this period of my life, Jane Eyre says, my heart far oftener swelled with thankfulness than sank with dejection. So this was written in 1847, and Charlotte Bronte understood what feeling like mattering is. Jane Eyre felt welcome. She was living amidst regard. People welcomed her in her community. 40 years later, one of the great American psychologists and philosophers, William James, who was also in vogue today, he talked about not feeling valued. Jane Eyre is here telling us, when I live in a community where I belong, I feel valued. But the opposite experience, which is so negative and toxic, was documented by William James 40 years later, where he said the following: if no one turned around when we entered, answered when we spoke, or minded what we did, but if every person we met cut us dead and acted as if we were non-existing things, a kind of rage and impotent despair would ere long well up in us, from which the cruelest bodily tortures would be a relief. For this would make us feel that, however bad might be our plight, we had not sunk to such a depth as to be unworthy of attention at all. Many people who are experiencing being invisible, being rejected, being ignored, just like William James described here, respond in one of two very difficult ways, with either aggression or depression, because they feel ostracized. And 13 out of the last 15 shootings in school settings were perpetrated by people who were bullied, who felt dejected, who felt ostracized. So the distance between feeling ostracized and dejected and ignored and invisible and committing a heinous act of aggression, that distance is very short. So we have to pay attention to how we make people feel in the world. So then we can come to the official definition of mattering, which is just feeling valued and adding value. So mattering is really this wheel that I imagine, where on one hand we want to feel valued, we want to feel that we are adding value, we're making a difference in the world. And now we have to ask ourselves, where do these feelings come from? And feeling valued has three sources when you think about it: the self, the relationships that I have in the world, and the community where I live. And then if you ask yourself, where do I contribute? As you well said, which is part of mattering, I contribute to myself, I contribute to the people I love, and I contribute to the community. So this is pretty much a will. And if we're feeling valued, we're more likely to engender a virtuous cycle in which we were going to have the psychological wherewithal, the energy to contribute to other people. So now, when you think about it a little more, you have to ask yourself, well, but what really about the self and relationships makes me feel valued? And I would like to propose that we feel valued through wellness, experiences of wellness in the world, and experiences of fairness in the world. And when you ask yourself, what are really the two main things that I contribute to the world? I would like to suggest that you are contributing wellness and you are contributing fairness. So let's dig even deeper and ask ourselves, okay, what is it about the self that makes me feel good? Well, self-care, self-acceptance, but it's very difficult to experience self-acceptance if I don't experience belonging, trust, and equality in the community, right? Because then you're going to be like Martin Sheen, who had to change his name to make a career for himself, right? And what about relationships? We need to experience support, care. So all of these are part of wellness. It's very hard to pursue wellness in yourself or others, to achieve self-determination or self-efficacy, the belief that I can make a difference in the world, when you are not being nourished by yourself or others in your surroundings. And without self-efficacy, it's very difficult to achieve happiness, because happiness is a life project, right? In order to achieve meaning in life, we need to believe that we can make a difference. These are the ingredients of self-efficacy. So now, where is the fairness of it all? To achieve a state of fairness, you need to be treated with respect. You need to live in a community where you feel like you belong, where there is equality. So as you can see here, mattering is very closely related to experiences of wellness, love, affection, being creative, making a difference in the world. But it's also related to fairness, because fairness deals with opportunities in life. And if you don't have respect, and if you don't have opportunities for self-actualization, then we have a problem. So let's move a little forward and say that really mattering consists of feeling valued and adding value. And there are, unfortunately, some threats that we encounter in this pursuit. So the first threat, as was described by William James, I feel invisible. Have you ever felt invisible? Have you gone to a cocktail party where nobody talked to you? Sometimes, have you been to a party where people are not really looking at you, but looking at the more important people in the room? So then you're feeling ignored, because you're feeling I'm not as important as whoever is walking behind me, that this person has to move her gaze, right? That's an experience of invisibility. When you multiply this 1,000 times by certain individuals who are not being regarded with the respect that Jane Eyre was ascribed, then these individuals develop a lot of problems. They become more stressful. Their lives consist of more experiences of powerlessness. There is more secretion of cortisol in the body. And invisibility leads to a number of problems. Of course, invisibility is related inversely to the feeling of entitlement of other people. Because usually, your ego is going to shrink in proportion to the ego of other people or groups in the community. Does that make sense? So entitlement is the enemy of invisibility, right? Now, if we look for another second at how animals deal with experiences of being ignored or being treated unfairly, we can learn a lot from capuchin monkeys, who are not treated with respect. And the aggression that I just shared with you is vividly seen in this video. So I would like to ask my colleagues to play a video by Professor De Waal describing how capuchin monkeys experience lack of fairness. Please.
So a final experiment that I want to mention to you is our fairness study. And so this became a very famous study, and there's now many more, because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs, and with birds, and with chimpanzees, but with Sarah Brosnan we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group, they know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, that's a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests a rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again.
What can I say? I finished my lecture. This is what happens when you have experiences of lack of fairness that are accumulating within your psychological framework. You feel less than other people. You feel that the world is not fair to you. And the response is usually one of aggression. And if you don't aggress, you tend to repress, right? And when you repress all those experiences of lack of fairness, it's not very healthy either. So, of course, the monkey was feeling like, what's wrong with me? Am I chopped liver? Don't I deserve a grape? Right? You're asking me to give you a grape. I give you a grape. And you're still treating me with disrespect. Right? So this is just a symbol of what happens to many people in society who do not experience fairness. Okay? Now, we know that when people feel valued, they are able to make a difference in society. When they try to change things for the better, but they encounter barriers, either by your boss, or your father, or your colleague, or an institution, or society as a whole, when you're trying to make it fairer for everybody, but there is no hope for change, you develop helplessness, which usually has to do with trying to change something that some autocrat, body, or person, or system is blocking you, right? So it's very important to understand not just the parts of mattering, but also the threats. So we know from the literature that the more engaged you are, the more you feel valued and you add value to life, to work, the more you have opportunities to make a difference and to feel recognized and appreciated, the more likely you are to be thriving in life. And those people who do not have the experience of engagement will either be struggling or they will be suffering. In a study we conducted here at the University of Miami, we asked about 7,000 employees, about 50% of the workforce at the University of Miami, to tell us about their experiences of mentoring. And it turns out that mentoring for 7,000 people who work at this university is highly related for engagement and inclusiveness in the workplace. And what we found was that the more engaged you are, the higher all your domains of well-being, overall purpose, social, financial, physical, etc. So there is a lot of empirical evidence, not just from our study, but from others, that a sense of mentoring, that you work in a place where you are made to feel valued and you can contribute, it's going to enhance your inclusiveness, your engagement, and your well-being. So very quickly, for 1 point increase in the culture of mentoring, people increase their engagement, and 1.47 they increase their inclusiveness scores. These are very statistically significant changes. When people improve their engagement or their inclusiveness score, their overall well-being goes up. So there is something about feeling included and feeling part of a community and making a difference. So we did this study and we found out that inclusiveness predicted purpose, social, physical, and community well-being. So all of this, now you ask yourself, how do I make this happen? It sounds really great. How do I make it happen for myself, for my workplace, for the community where I work, where I live? And the answer is, it all comes from a certain set of core values. You cannot promote wellness and fairness. You cannot promote mentoring if you don't have a clear set of values that guide your work. So it's really important to ask ourselves what values drive our life. And I'm going to propose a set of values that is going to increase wellness and fairness in different domains of life. So when you think about the values for wellness and fairness, you don't have to memorize this, by the way, okay? Only the top 3 rows. There will be an exam. There are people waiting outside. No. I would like you to walk with me through a series of values that are going to make a difference in how we experience wellness. So fairness is about balancing what's fair to me with what's fair to other people, right? It's not just Isaac that I'm going to get the biggest piece of the pie or the long part of the stick. How do I balance what I deserve in life with what other people deserve in life? How do I balance how much do I use the environment and how much of the environment do I want to give and to leave for future generations? So there is a big difference between Isaac saying, I just want what's good for Isaac, right? As opposed to saying, I have to balance what I need and desire with what my family needs, with what other members of the community need. And if I am going to make a fairness equation balance, then I'm going to promote autonomy, not just for myself, but for other people. So the more we achieve fairness as a fundamental value, the more we're going to promote autonomy, the more we're going to have a feeling of self-efficacy, and the more we're going to experience health and lower degrees of illness. So basically, the more fair is your behavior, the fairer the community, the family, the workplace, the more we're going to enhance the green symbols: autonomy, caring, participation, subjective well-being, and objective well-being. So now, to conclude, you may be asking yourself, it sounds great, but I have to go back to work, and I have to convince a group of people that we really should be practicing more wellness and fairness. You're going back to school, you're going back to your community, to your families, and you're asking, what do I do to enact these principles? How do I lead a team so that we can all feel valued and add value? And I came up because everybody loves acronyms and I don't want to be left out, so I had to come up with an acronym myself. So this acronym stands for I value it. So when you go back to your communities and you think, I want to work with a group of colleagues to improve my workplace, I would recommend that the first thing you do is you behave like an inclusive host. You are inviting people to change the organization, to change a community, to work together on something. Being an inclusive host is the way you behave when you invite people to dinner. What do you do? When you invite somebody for dinner, they come to your house. How do you behave? What do you do? Tell me. You welcome them. What else? You offer something to drink. What else do you do? Sorry? You introduce them to others. You want them to feel visible, right? You grant them respect. That's being an inclusive host. That's rule number 1 of any organizational improvement or community change. Rule number 2, people want to aspire to a better state of affairs. We call this being a visionary. Being a visionary is working with other people to state a desired state of affairs so that people will be inspired to work with you. And then the third thing that we need to do is to need to identify assets, because people like to contribute based on what they are good at, obviously. We call this being an asset seeker. Being an asset seeker is going to improve people to feel valued and to add value. And then, in order to make progress on any project, you have to be a good listener. Unless you are a good listener, you are not going to help other people to feel valued. You have to work with them to make sense of what's happening in our organization. And you need to evaluate what you're doing. Otherwise, you don't know that you're making progress. To add value, you have to be rigorous, right? It's not just I'm saying we're making progress. You have to evaluate. You have to have a sense that what you are doing as a collective, as an individual, is making a difference in the world. So you have to evaluate, you have to implement. It's not just a talk fest, right? We're having a great time talking to one another here at a conference. That's what conferences are about. But eventually when you go home, you're going to have to make a decision about what am I going to implement to add value to my life and to some other people. And finally, I think it's really important, we know from positive psychology about the importance of developing your signature strengths. Nobody likes copying what everybody else is doing. And all of us have unique signature strengths that we like to put our stamp on. What is it that each one of you can do to improve your own community, your own life, add value to yourself, add value to some other people? What can you do in order to enhance somebody's mattering? So I would like to leave you with just one thought. We know from the research that when you make a commitment to yourself and to somebody else to do just one thing, which may be to work in a school to improve how children are treated, to improve your workplace, your community, to make sure that you add value, that you enact fairness in some aspect of your life. What we know from the research is that once you make a commitment and then you share it with other people, you are much more likely to carry it out than if you just told it to yourself. So just as a take-home message, I would like to encourage you to think about how can I help a person, a cause, to feel like they matter. Because I think it's pretty intuitive for most of us to worry about our own selves. I just want to ask everybody to think about how can I matter and how can I make other people matter. Thank you very much.